Hey guys, so this is Babellion episode 11, and I'm here with Lawrence. Do you want to say a few words?
Sure, my name is Lawrence Ukenye. I'm the current editor-in-chief of the Temple News.
Mm-hmm. And I don't want to embarrass you, but I will say, social media manager of Philadelphia Neighborhoods. He also has had words in The Root and the Daily Beast. And you've also worked at the Daily Beast, right?
Yeah, I interned there over the summer.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And editor-in-chief, is that a normal timeline to get there at this point as a junior?
I wouldn't say it's normal. So like that's great, but it's definitely like a reflection of what I feel like I've put in the past 2 years. So I think things are definitely going well right now. Yeah. Life is good.
Yeah. And you started as a freelancer there, right?
Yeah, so my freshman year I was a freelancer in the feature section. Okay. I basically did Temple News and the university's like TV station, which is Temple Update. So I kind of balanced the two like over the course of my freshman year, and I figured out over time that I really liked writing way more than I liked being in like television production. It just felt like way more technical and not really like as intellectual as, you know, I wanted it to be. So I really got in like hard, you know, I got involved in as many ways as I could. And then I applied to be like a section editor my sophomore year. And then it was obviously like a strange year because of COVID. Yeah. So like I just really started putting myself out there and like really doing everything that like they needed people to do since like we were so like pressed for content at the time.
Got it.
Yeah.
Zoom meetings?
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah. You learn how to deal with it.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah. I mean, everyone I feel like has had to learn how to deal with it, you know?
Yeah, but it's definitely weird having the removed interactions.
Yeah. I think that's what makes this year so special because like we're all back in like the office together and like interacting with each other. So like it does feel like we're making up for lost time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you conduct interviews during that year? Did other people conduct interviews like online, virtually?
Oh, you mean like just like interviewing people for stories?
Yes.
Yeah. I think for the most part, I remember my freshman year, like I liked to like physically like meet people when I'd interview them, just so, like I could like get to know them a bit. And then it just felt like last year everything was like over the phone and like on Zoom, which was like not the worst thing, but like just kind of weird, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I read a few pieces about the pandemic, about the vaccines.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you talk about things that are uncomfortable? The election?
I think what it comes down to for the most part is the fact that like you have to understand that like people are actively taking I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
People are actively taking in your information to make like life decisions. So like if I write a story about like, let's say for example, like how to get to like a testing site, like vaccine information, like it just doesn't go on a website and sit there just like entertain people. Like someone's actually reading it and saying like, yo, like here's where I go to get tested. Here's like this current like stage I'm eligible for like in the vaccine rollout. Here's all that information, and I feel like we provide like a public service to people when we really like push ourselves to like make that information available like during like times of crisis.
So again, not to appear creepy, but you did an interview that I watched and you talked about wanting to help people. So is that what you're saying there? Is that what you're referencing?
Yeah, I think for me, like my job is very much about like managing people and like watching those people interact with other people, which is like very like weird to think about, but like also like very interesting. So like me, say for example, as editor-in-chief, it's not necessarily about like pointing at people and giving people orders. It's mainly just about like really fostering like a sense where they can succeed even like in these like strange times that we're living in. And then when people are comfortable in that sense, then they're more comfortable, let's say like talk to a random person on the street that they need for a story, really step outside their comfort zone and do something that they haven't done before. So when you build that like newsroom like culture, it like filters down into the work that they do, and then everything as a result is just better holistically.
I see why you're editor-in-chief. That's a great philosophy.
Yeah.
Do a lot of people do work about things they've experienced before they write about it?
What do you mean?
Well, it's pretty generic as far as questions go. But like, do you typically write about things you have experienced?
Not really, just because I don't see journalism in that way.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people like opinion writing. I did it in high school, and I don't really look back fondly on it. I think of myself more so in terms of like how I like can facilitate like a public service to people. So like I really like specialize in like hard facts, you know. I think people who do write and give their opinions really have like a special place in like public discourse, just because like the more voices the better.
Yeah.
But I think as far as like I'm concerned, like I'm really like in the fact business. So like I really like reporting on like stuff that's happening and how it affects people rather than like my view on things, because I'm just one person. Yeah.
Well, I think that touches on, there's a lot of bias surrounding journalism. There's a lot of scrutiny that journalists have been under for decades, especially within the last 2 decades.
Of course.
A lot of shame. In your Instagram bio, you say one of the good ones, and it's kind of referencing that.
Yeah.
Right? And the point is to spread fact.
Yeah. I think in terms of like how journalism is like perceived like right now, I think the big thing to keep in mind is the fact that, and I think at the Temple News we just hosted like a seminar speaker series with like alumni who came back, and I think one alumni was like one thing that people kind of like don't really understand now is like how journalism like works. Like they think we just kind of like get the facts and we just like dump them on the internet, rather than like actually like fact checking and like having it go through multiple channels. So like as a result of that, people are just like programmed to think that like these things that we put out like come from on high, when in actuality we've done like the background, which I think is why people like hate journalists now, or like you know, I just think it comes from like a lack of like public knowledge about like the work that we do, which is unfortunate because like we're living in such like crazy times right now to begin with. Yeah.
Some more division is not the best.
What's up?
I said more division.
No.
I'm mumbling.
No, you're good.
Is not very productive.
And I think in some ways like people who are journalists or like claim to be journalists, I don't want to call these people journalists, are like fueling that, you know, fueling that like mistrust, which only like makes my job harder. I say my job, you know, I'm a college student, but like it will make my job harder, and it makes people who do my job like a lot more difficult, I'd say.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people will reference extremist news. You know, the stuff that we see on YouTube and Facebook, conspiracy theorists.
Yeah. I think that stuff is like really weird because like I was telling somebody about this the other day. I think that it seems that like people like now like turn to social media mainly to just validate whatever preconceived notions that they have, as opposed to like actually making the effort to like actually go out and like educate themselves. So like say for example, like I don't want to like, you know, have people like know my beliefs or whatever, but like just to give you an example, if someone like say for example is like anti-vax and I'm not anti-vax, if someone is anti-vax, they will likely go on social media and like find articles to back their point and then share those articles rather than like actually doing the research to like educate themselves, which is like ironic because these are the same people who say, well, oh, I need more like research, I need more knowledge on it, when actively they're just trying to find things that like satisfy whatever makes them feel comfortable. And I think that's really like a problem now, just because like there's so much information and you can kind of pick and choose, as opposed to like in the 1960s when there were like 3 television stations that people got their news from, and the paper that like showed up on your door. So I think it makes like everyone's like life difficult because you hear so many things. Not really my life difficult because like I do this not for a living, but I hope to do this for a living, and I'm like trained in like understanding like what is and what isn't. Whereas like the average Joe who like just wants to like go to work and like come back and like, you know, raise their kids isn't really thinking about this stuff as much as I am, because I have to, you know. But yeah,
there's a lot of cherry picking, and like you said, people are sharing. There's always a performative nature to it. I've been guilty of it. I mean, I've shared things because I want to share, but also there's another thing going on every time I share one of those posts.
Do you mean like social justice, or like what?
I think if I'm not intentional enough and there aren't calls to action involved, yes, that's what I'm referencing.
Okay. Yeah, I think my take on that is like I think that like social media is obviously like a benefit in terms of like how it gives people the ability to like voice their opinion in certain ways that people couldn't in the past, which is always a benefit because like, you know, we live in a free society. The more ideas, the better.
Right.
And that helps, you know, people innovate, helps people change, and ultimately like helps like facilitate like growth and acceptance like in the long run, you know, as we see like things that were like deemed taboo like 50 years ago like are like way common now. But it also has like the downside, as I said, of like really like making things echo chambers to where people just seek out what they want to seek out. So let's say, for example, like last summer after the murder of George Floyd, like I'd go on social media and see like all this social justice stuff, you know, and not that it was bad. It's great that people are like bringing attention to it, and it's great that people are actively making the effort to educate themselves in ways that they hadn't done it before. But a lot of stuff, like in hindsight, was just mainly like performative, you know, it seems. Not to say that those people don't care about those issues anymore, but like in the long run, like things do die off. You know, life continues. People like, you know, start watching football again, you know, things start getting back to normal, and people like don't really hit those things with the same intensity. Which just makes people further question whether or not it's like actually effective.
Yeah.
But I guess we can like only like judge that like in the long run. I guess social media hasn't been around like that long, but yeah, it's just my take. Yeah.
Well, I think the other thing is boiling down what you were talking about earlier. You were referencing that people boil really complex things down.
Yeah.
So that people can understand it.
Yeah. I think one example of that would be like, and correct me if like I'm misinterpreting what you're saying, but like, say for example, like the issue of like Black Lives Matter and like what happened like after George Floyd was like murdered. It seemed that like the people who were trying to like justify like Derek Chauvin just took like the basics of what they saw on video rather than like really internalize it in terms of like what systematic oppression and what police brutality have been like before that video was even like recorded, you know. And I think when you think about like how social media can ultimately impact people, not just in terms of what they believe, but like what they believe things to have been, it just makes, you know, understanding, I guess, significant issues like way more difficult. And that's something I've noticed. I think that's just like my personal opinion, but I haven't really figured out for myself whether social media is like more of a positive or like more of a negative. I obviously grew up with it. So like if it were stripped from me, like it would be like obviously very jarring.
Yeah.
But like as someone who like approaches things from like a news-based perspective, it does seem like it has very like corrosive effects that will like linger and like probably get more pronounced with time.
Can you expand on that a little bit?
It just goes back to what I've said before. I feel like people just like use it to like validate how they feel.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like if you walked out like into the street in like 1847 and said something that was like really like not offensive, but like just really like out there, you know, like people would like physically tell you like how they felt about that. They would either like throw stones at you, you know, they would kind of like shout at you, they would like give you criticism, whereas now like if I pick up my phone and I tweet something, I can just like go back to like watching Netflix, you know, cuddling with my dog.
You're right.
So it kind of just gives people a pass to say stuff that might not even like be like accepted in like the marketplace of ideas. But because it's on like Twitter and it's on Facebook, it's on Instagram, people like consume it. And for some people, obviously like they may like push back against it, but for some people like they might use that as like fuel for like a preconceived belief that they have, which in actuality might just be like really fringe. But like since someone else says it, they think, oh, this is okay, you know?
Yes. Well, I also wanted to talk about, I don't know if I'm going to phrase this in a way that makes sense, but it's very easy to get away with not doing work, at least in my experience. It's easy to have just like the minimum of details when I'm researching things sometimes. So, and social media feeds into that, but we don't want to get too far outside of it because it can help your line of work. It can help everyone's line of work. So how do you handle that?
What specifically?
The balance between, without like standing on a pedestal and talking about social media and separating yourself from our generation, still researching properly and not spending a lot of time on those.
Oh, okay. I think for me, like the balance is like making the conscious effort to like really think about where I get my information from.
Okay.
I only go to social media mainly, and I don't know if like I'm bragging when I say this. I really only go to social media when like I want to be entertained.
Okay.
And when I want to know how other people are feeling about a particular topic. Like I never go to social media like to form an opinion on something. Like I watch a lot of like I've watched like a lot of cable news, and like even like now I'm turned off to cable news a lot, but most of like how I like come to my like opinions on things are just by like actively making the effort to like research, get things from trusted sources. I think people can like really like should really make the effort to like separate like what's entertainment from what's like actual like fact information that they can consume. A lot of times those things are like intersecting now to where it's like hard to differentiate, but I think if you make that conscious effort, like your life is like a lot easier in terms of like really forming an opinion and not letting others like dictate how you think. Yeah.
How do you think journalists can do what you're saying?
Well, I think journalists, like, I might just be like really blunt here. I don't think you should get into journalism unless you have these things like to begin with. Like, I don't think this is something that you can pick up after you start.
Okay.
I think something that we see a lot of now is that journalists are like making it a point to like be like brands for themselves, which is good because like a lot of these people are like responsible, like building followers to where like these people are getting accurate information from like a particular person who's like reliable, trustworthy, and can like back up what they're saying with facts. Where some people now just like I see like really want to use their platforms just for like enriching themselves.
Yeah.
But I think coming into this field, you just have to like really value like facts, like honesty, and just like making it more about the facts than yourself. Because like if you focus on the facts, you know, maybe I don't want to say success will come because like success should be judged by like the impact of your work rather than how it affects you. But the merits will come, and then people will take into account like how your work has impacted other people rather than making it a point to like present yourself with the news that you're presenting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like there's a thin line there.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'd say so.
Do you think there's a way people can very definitively cross that line when they're trying to advertise themselves and...
I think it's harder for people who work in like actual like newspapers just because like they're tied to like a company that they have to represent constantly. But for people who have like YouTube channels and like all that, I think a quick way to cross it is just mainly just like giving your opinion. Not that giving your opinion is wrong, you know. Obviously some people give their opinion and like those opinions are based in facts and like they can obviously like walk and chew gum at the same time. But when you do so in a way that's like dishonest, I don't want to like call any networks or people by name, but like if you do it in a way that's dishonest and like really shows disregard to the facts, then I feel like that's when it becomes problematic.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think investigative journalists who are talking about really serious issues that are outside of the U.S. or whether it's war or... Do you think they get grouped together with those extremists sometimes?
What do you mean?
I have heard people compare those who are talking about corporate fraud or war to those who are talking about, who are spouting conspiracy theories on the internet. And obviously it's not fair, but have you seen that happen?
Like people like reporting on stuff like being categorized the same as like extremists?
Not necessarily, but because extremists exist in their own ecosystem almost, and they're just talking to their audience.
Yeah.
If some mainstream news, like, they don't want to report on things, or it's harder for them to report on things because they get backlash. So then I think people who are just reading the news or witnessing the news will decide that they are one and the same.
Oh, I don't know that that's fair. I do think that people, extremists who have like fringe opinions on things, like they're in a class of their own, you know?
Yeah.
I do think investigative journalists have like a responsibility to like really shine light on the truth. Sometimes
Absolutely.
like doing so might be like incredibly difficult and like damaging, not just to yourself, but like maybe like your emotional state or really how you go about doing your job, just because at times you might get like pushback from not just like your readers but your sources, who might fear going on the record about certain things. But I think, you know, as long as they focus on like the facts and like doing so in like an honest way that's respectful to their sources,
Yeah.
and is ethical, then I think that, you know, they're obviously like in a good spot.
This might be a silly question, but
Okay.
what do you think the advantages are to really risky investigative reporting versus the risks
Of what?
of going as far as to attract negative attention from governments, like people who go into other countries and report and are undercover and risk their lives? I mean, there are obvious risks, but
Yeah.
do you think that there are advantages?
You mean in comparison to people who actually like do like the really like undercover stuff versus the people who...
That is a better way to put it. Yeah, the people who are doing it from the safety of their homes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I don't...
Yeah.
I think that, like, your contributions to, like, the public ecosystem of facts, really just go as far as to what you're comfortable with. Obviously, some people, like, really love, like, reporting from, like, war zones and really, like, tense, dangerous situations just because, like, they know that they can do, like, a lot more based on, like, how comfortable they are.
Yeah.
Whereas some people are, like, really... how should I say? Some people are just like less inclined to put themselves in that situation, just because like personal stuff. Like I'm a very like, I don't want to say mellow person, but I'm a very like, you know, I'm comfortable knowing that like the work I do is like a reflection of like where I was like at my best, and I don't think I could be at my best if I was like stressed about not just my reporting, but like my life, you know?
Yes.
So I think obviously like, you know, it's more suited to who you are as a person. But that definitely doesn't take away from like your contributions to journalism as a whole.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, going with that, talking about I was talking about uncomfortable things, but very important things that the public seems to have gotten sick of, we need to keep talking about them, like climate change. How do journalists approach that?
I think that like, since it's kind of like in the vaccine, like spectrum of things where you have like a bunch of people who deny it.
Yeah.
I think it has gotten to a point where we can only do so much to like educate people because like they have to like make the effort to pursue the facts themselves. But, you know, I think at the end of the day, it's mainly not just on us, but, you know, the government, other like major institutions and corporations like really chipping in. Because journalists, like, as I said, like we obviously have a lot of power and a lot of sway. But for something that is objectively a problem like climate change,
Yes.
like we can only do so much, you know, and I think the government does play a big role in like helping like move the needle in that direction.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, just headlines. I've heard a lot of conversation about how bleak headlines can cause a loss of hope in people.
Yeah.
So reframing those headlines.
I think it varies by the publication because some outlets are honestly like they make the effort to be very I don't know how to put it. Just like at the Temple News, like we like make our headlines to where they're just like a reflection of the story. Like we don't try to add spin. We don't really make an effort to like, I don't want to say deceive, but we present the news how it is, you know? Where some publications obviously, have a bias. So like, maybe presenting the issue of climate change in like a bleak manner, in their heads is like, okay, well, here we are really presenting this issue in terms of how dire it is. Whereas like they don't understand, the average reader is like looking at this and thinking, well, dang it, I was right. Maybe there isn't anything I can do to begin with, And that only reinforces like the belief that like, climate change is only, so far and so massive of a concept that they can't even like put their arms around it,
Yes.
Yeah.
Very well put. What do you think is missing in the field? That is a very broad question, so you can take it wherever.
It's kind of weird because I feel like the field has kind of like grown in so many different ways that it kind of doesn't feel like there hasn't really been a part of culture that the field hasn't touched anymore. There hasn't really been a part of, there has not been a part of the culture where the field hasn't touched it. I don't know. I think it kind of goes back to my main point. Like the reason I decided to pursue this was just because of like how much I love facts and how much I love like providing a public service to people. I feel like getting back to that would kind of be great. Especially since we're living in such an interesting time right now. I feel like a lot of journalists like really are like caught up in themselves and like what they feel like they're doing to like really represent how serious this moment is. And when they do that, they kind of just take, the eyes of the public away from the issues themselves and then really like have them be the center of attention, where, now more than ever, like the issues that we're confronted with need to be like the focal point of like public attention.
Do you think there's a way to exist on platforms like TikTok and not fall into that?
I don't want to say there isn't a way, because some people are obviously very innovative. And, I think, I'm still very young, but, I do get that I sound a little like a boomer.
You don't.
Yeah. But I do feel like when you present information on those platforms, you kind of invite criticism based on the other kinds of content that exists there, which, whether fair or unfair, gets cast on you, and then makes your life difficult. But I feel like that's kind of weird to say, because basically every social media outlet would technically have that problem, just because, a lot of some like egregious stuff that's on TikTok you find worse stuff on Twitter, and Twitter's somehow considered like the standard for like voicing your opinion in the 21st century. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know.
So I want to talk about you a little bit.
Okay.
Why did you decide to focus on this so early?
Well, I like to think I'm not like too early. Like, when I was like a kid, like, I've always like really liked media. Like I've always really liked sports. So like I used to watch SportsCenter, ESPN all day. We used to have this like paper that got like sent to our house that had like all the high school sports in it that I would like read. And then like over time, like as I got into politics more, and then 2016 happened, like I really wanted to like pursue journalism that had an impact on like the world. Not really so much as like changing things and like impacting policy, but more so like I wanted to be a source of like public information for people. Yeah, I mean, that's really how it started. I feel like at Temple, like I've been given like the opportunity and the privilege to like really like round out what I want my career to look like. And through some of the internships I've had, some of the, opportunities I've had to work with people, like I've really gotten a sense of like what I want to do once I graduate.
Very cool. Do you think that you would rather be working within independent journalism versus with like one organization?
I think I want to work in an organization just because like I love collaborating and working with other people. And I feel like I'm at my best when I have other people like bounce ideas off of. Yeah. But whatever organization that is, I'd want that to be like a reflection of like my values, even though even if like those values aren't being like articulated in like what I produce, but I just want to know that like the individuals who are like running the establishment have like an understanding of like what journalism is about and like what are like its core principles, rather than like, you know, obviously like sales are important, but I wouldn't want there to be any sort of like ideology surrounding where I'd work. I want there to be just like a fact-focused mentality.
Do you think there are guardrails that can be put up at organizations though?
I don't doubt that they exist. I personally wouldn't want to speak on that just because I have never worked in a place like that. The college paper I work at now, it's like very like, you know, we care about the facts, and then our opinion section is like, you know, our opinion section. Like if you have an opinion, you have an argument for it. Like, you know, we happen to go to like a very liberal school, but like if, you know, someone with conservative views like comes to me, like I'm not going to like gatekeep, you know, that's not my job, you know, as long as they can back their opinion and, you know, they produce it in a way that's concise and like a reflection of like what they believe in, like a fact-oriented matter, then like, you know, more power to them. But like as far as like guardrails, like I don't put any up for my staff or my team. You know, as long as things are reported like fairly in a balanced manner with like a respect to the facts, then like I think that's my chief priority.
All right. Yeah. Because would you say that you can get closer? No. I'm sorry, closer to the truth when you're not putting the guardrails up?
Well, I mean, it depends. I think the main point of the guardrails up is just so that like people feel, well, yeah, I guess you could say that, because if you work somewhere where, let's say, like your boss won't let you pursue a certain angle or a certain lead because, you know, one of the owners of the paper happens to have like a tie to that company or entity, then that's like not good. That's not journalism, you know? But like if you're working in a place where like everyone has free reign to like conduct interviews, form relationships with sources in a way that like they aren't really being like infringed upon, I feel like that's where like the best journalism is produced, because like I wouldn't want someone looking over my shoulder if I'm trying to do, you know, the best job I can. So yeah, I think when you have, I mean, it's kind of like how the world works, you know, like when people feel comfortable to like experiment and try different things, then you usually get a better outcome than when, let's say, you have people that like you really restrict and confine, you know?
Absolutely.
I mean, I think it works. That analogy works well in most instances. Yeah.
Where do you want to keep producing journalism? Do you want to stay in Philly?
I don't know yet. I think I definitely want to stay in a major city, just because like I feel like cities, just because of how diverse and how like populated and how like energizing they are, they really produce like the best stories, and I feel like you have the opportunity to like make your work reach more people. You know, there are instances to where like there'll be a paper in like, you know, a small town, and they'll like uncover something that's like really big and really major. But I feel like in terms of cities, you really get the opportunity to let your work touch people in a variety of ways, just because there's so much happening. As far as Philly, I mean, I love Philly. Philly's been really good to me the past 3 years. But, you know, I'm not sure if it's like New York or Washington, or I'd really just want to stay like in the Northeast, if I'm being honest. But I mean, I'm still like pretty young, so I don't want to like build a box or anything. But I'd love to stay in Philly, DC, New York.
All right.
Yeah.
Going back to, I was going to say to your past, and that sounds very odd.
Yeah.
But are there specific pieces that come to mind when you think about when you were first interested? I know you're talking about sports news, but is there like a specific piece?
I think that a lot of like my understanding of journalism comes from like how journalists covered the 2016 election. Not really specific articles or specific stories, but just like the collective culture around journalism at the time. It was like a very weird period because you had people who really had never seen anything like the candidate that was running for president at the time.
Yeah.
In terms of how like loose he was with facts. And then you had some people who were like, well, should we really be giving this person this much coverage if they're really going to be like saying all these things? But like, then again, he is still running for president. So like, how do you balance that out while being honest to your viewers and your readers? Mm-hmm. So seeing that clash and how like the public responded to it was like very like alarming for me.
Yes.
Because here I was, I knew that like, you know, I had the power maybe one day down the line to really like step into this and be like the voice of reason for people. Mm-hmm. Where it seemed like a lot of people at the time were really conflicted in terms of like how do they balance like these two like clashing realities with this particular candidate.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And going with that, how much do you think identity matters, especially in fact-based work? Do you ever insert your own experiences?
Personally, no, but I'm not against that at all. Mm-hmm. I think that there is a place in journalism, and there's definitely a growing place for like how people can like talk about how different intersections of their identity like affect who they are, and how those like lived experiences could potentially or have potentially affected other people. Mm-hmm. I do think that like journalists now, you know, as much as I've said like the branding and making, you know, it about you to be kind of like problematic. Yes. That's definitely an avenue where I see like there being a lot of potential. Because I feel like there was a time where people felt like that wasn't something you should really give a lot of light and attention to. Yeah. But now we're seeing that as like the importance of representation and like really people getting a sense of, you know, if I know someone going through this, then it somehow makes it easier for me to like come to terms with how like the world sees me. And when people feel more comfortable and accepted, it really makes for like not just like better like reporting, but like a better like society as a whole. So yeah, I definitely think there's a space for like identity in journalism 100%.
Do you think that these pieces can fit beyond the opinion section? Because these are lived experiences.
Oh yeah, of course, 100%. I'm a big guy in terms of like solutions journalism. Like I think people should like use their experiences as ways to like pursue types of reporting that, let's say, someone else wouldn't be able to pursue. So let's say, like, say for example, you grew up in a particular area where there's like poverty, homelessness, you know, high infant mortality. You know, you yourself with that lived experience can go in and like really form like crucial relationships with sources that you can use to build out something that you can tell other people or convey to other people. Whereas someone who doesn't have that lived experience just doesn't really have like a sense of how to like report that in the most ethical way. Yeah. Just say, for example, like if I never experienced any of those things, then how am I going to know that like if I'm covering a certain like crime scene, how to refer to something or something that I haven't seen before? And that's when you really get into like dangerous situation, because then you can like misrepresent your sources. Yes. And then it makes obviously like the reporting like a lot muddier, because then you aren't actually like telling the story as they see it, which is ultimately like what you want to present to your readers or viewers. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think, we touched on it earlier, but I think it falls under what you were talking about. Do you think there are stories that are not being talked about?
Yeah, I mean, there are always stories that are being talked about. I think that like, and it kind of goes back to what I said, like being in a city is like really interesting because there's so many like different like puzzles that you can like try and figure out. Whereas like in other places, there's really like only one big beat or one big story. But yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a lot of stuff, especially now that we're like living in a pandemic. There are lasting effects that will persist onwards. Health inequality, you know, how we tackle like income inequality. Mm-hmm. People have known these things have existed long before the pandemic, but now that the pandemic really like opened that wound that everyone can see it, it's really up to not just journalists to highlight how those issues like affect real people, but as I said about like climate change, it's about like governments really like making the effort to see what the public sees and then really making the effort to like find solutions-oriented ways to address those problems rather than making them worse.
Now, if we go back to your position as editor-in-chief,
Yeah.
do you have preferences when it comes to how news is distributed because you want it to be sent to a lot of people?
I mean, what we do now is that every other Tuesday we print, and then we have daily online content. We used to print weekly, and then it got cut back last year because of the pandemic, and I kind of like kept it bi-weekly just so we can really focus on online more. I prefer online more just because like you can really be more thorough in your reporting. A lot of stuff that people don't know about print is that like it's not just like putting the words on the page, it's like making them all fit, which is like really hard.
Yeah.
Usually like a lot of people don't see what we do like behind the scenes in terms of like cutting stuff and like really like playing around with word counts to make stuff fit in columns. It's just really, it gets to a point where sometimes it doesn't feel like we're doing journalism, which is like, you know, obviously people have different opinions, but like,
Yeah.
I really prefer online just because you can be concise. You can really tell stories with like various like mediums, whether it be with like data viz, videos. You can like embed stuff like tweets and stuff in there to like really round out the story. It just presents news in like a way more like 21st century format, which is like really geared towards like information, whereas like print was just mainly geared towards like getting the point across and then like leaving the reader to like internalize that, which is fine. I just feel like in terms of like what we can do now on the digital side, we can really make things way more comprehensive.
How often do you have writers edit after things are published?
After things are published?
Does that not happen?
Well, what we normally do is like, you know, someone will write a draft and like one editor edits, then it goes to our copy editor who like checks spelling, grammar, goes through everything, make sure everything is like factual. And then it goes to me, and then like I do my read through.
Okay.
It's like 3 to 4 different stages of editing.
All right.
Once things are like published, like they're out there, what normally will happen is like if we get like a fact wrong, and we catch it or someone else catches it, we'll like issue a correction and say like, hey, like we messed up, you know, this is actually what happened here.
Okay.
Luckily it hasn't happened a lot like since I've been hired, but it's definitely the way we can keep ourselves honest and like show people we're being ethical and thorough with things that we put out.
Absolutely. Do you have comment sections?
On our website, yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you ever receive, I don't know how to phrase this, skewed comments?
I think people don't really people comment on our site, but most of like the angst and like, I don't want to say backlash, but most of like the feedback that we get is like on our social media platforms.
Okay.
Like Instagram. I remember over the summer we put out a vaccine story when Temple like mandated the vaccine, and it had like a ton of comments. Like people were just like really like voicing their opinion.
Okay.
And I feel like that's honestly like, I mean, obviously like some of the stuff like I don't agree with, but like I think it's really great because like even if we aren't meeting those readers or those people on our website, they're making the choice to interact with our, you know, our content on Instagram and on Twitter. So like I think that goes back to what I was saying, where digital journalism has way more like reaching power, whereas like with print you're just like handing someone the newspaper and like it stops at that one person.
Yeah, conversations can happen.
Yeah.
Last question, but just for people watching who want to get hired, is there something specific that you look for?
Well, I think now we have our staff filled out, but the way to get involved is freelancing.
Okay.
So like you just contact any one of the editors, whether it be news, sports, opinion, features, our design team, our photo team, our multimedia team, and they just like hook you up with meeting times. They probably just show you ways to get involved, and then you go from there. I think that's like the best way to get involved because like you can kind of like work your way up like I did. Sometimes for a lot of people, if you just like give them, when a lot of people like interview for like staff positions, like they realize immediately like this is like a lot of shit. Whereas like when they're freelancing, they get like the background experience of like seeing how everything works from afar. And then they can kind of grow over time like I did. And then you get comfortable where you maybe want to apply for like a section editor position. And then maybe another year you apply for like a senior staff position like I did. And then, you know, you know, it kind of just takes off from there. Yeah.
I know I said last question, but do you know how many people who are section headers are overseeing?
So every print cycle, we put out 4 stories, and every online cycle, most sections try to put out around 3. So like, I'd say every 2 weeks, like a section is responsible for around 7 to 10 stories, which is like a lot.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of people managing deadlines, working within the confines of like the strengths that your freelancers have. As I said, it's like not easy by any means, but like, you know, it's definitely like the work that we do is essentially like what like the New York Times does and like any other major newspaper. It's just like obviously like a more massive scale, but like what we do is like, you know, the same thing. Like we fact check, we report, we put stuff out. If you want like industry based skills, like the best thing to do is like get involved in your college newspaper.
Okay, last question.
Okay.
Are most people majors in Klein?
No, actually. Well, I mean, that's not true. You said most. That is true. But it's not like everybody. We have like a lot of our design editors are like from Tyler. We have a lot of people. We had a public health major as our opinion editor last year. So like, I think that's what makes our organization so great is we're incorporating strengths from like all over Temple.
Absolutely.
And then like churning out like a product that is like very much reflective of like not just like what journalism majors think, but what like other people at Temple think, which like ultimately like makes everything like more grounded and like more original.
And you're studying it too?
Oh yeah, I'm a journalism major. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. I didn't mean for it to come after that.
Nah, you good.
Yeah, you were great. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.